Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. Nice to have you with us. It's a sunshiny, summery day here in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and we're happy to come to you as we do every couple of weeks to have a kind of a deep dive discussion about a subject that's really kind of interesting this time, and that is about what kind of big breakthroughs or big inventions or other kind of things are going to have happen in the next couple of years that will help facilitate this huge transition to a new world. So stay with us. I'm joined, as I always am, by friends Penny Kelly. Hello, Penny. How are you?
Hi, John. Hi, Kingsley. It's good to be here. I'm doing fine.
And Kingsley Dennis is here with us today.
Hi, John, Penny, and everyone. Greetings from a very rainy UK. Luckily, I got the roof on the top of my bunker on just in time.
And lamentably, Greg Braden is on an airplane again today, and so he's not going to be with us, but he'll be back next time. So let's go around the table and say what have you guys been thinking about? What do you think, Kingsley? What's been on your mind?
Well, John, what's been on my mind recently is very European centric, and it seems like the war bells in Europe have been ringing. And I say that because there's been quite a lot of news about certain European states talking or making noise about bringing back military service. And even France and Germany have been like slowly putting it on the table. But what's interesting is that in the UK, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak just recently announced a few days ago that the general election for the UK will be on July the 4th. He also stated that if the Tories, the Conservative, win, that one of their kind of promises is to bring back national service, military service, which I think is a very difficult decision or difficult thing to say in the UK, as anywhere in Europe. And Keir Starmer is the globalist puppet. You know, he's a member of the Trilateral Commission. When asked in an interview which one he preferred, Westminster or Davos, he actually said Davos. And, and he says because Davos can get things done quicker. That's what he said. He said Westminster is like a tribe, it's very closed. So, and that's very telling, to get things done quicker. Because I think if Starmer does get in, this agenda, the globalist agenda, will perhaps try to be accelerated because it's quite stodgy with the Conservatives at the moment. And interestingly, because of Klaus Schwab stepping down, one person that's been in the gossip about taking his place is Tony Blair. Tony Blair, the ex-Prime Minister of the UK. Interestingly, people say that if Starmer gets in power, he will be the hand puppet for Tony Blair because they both belong to the Labour Party. Just as Biden is a hand puppet for Obama, allegedly, Starmer will be the hand puppet for Blair, who is high connected to the WF and all the globalist clubs. So there's something in there which is showing a possible advancement in this side of the pond. And I think, I don't take seriously yet the war bells, but the war bell noise has been increasing over here, John.
Yeah, here too in different kind of ways. Penny?
Well, along the lines that Kingsley is talking about, one of the things that has really bothered me is the increasing amount of chaos everywhere. And along with that chaos, that attitude that Kingsley was just describing, Rishi Sunak doesn't want to be a wartime president. There's war talk all across Europe. There's rules that are supposedly coming out, being put out by the WEF and the WHO and the UN. And what has struck me again and again is, who do they think they are running everybody's life? Why are people sitting there letting them run their life? Or it isn't even letting them, it's like waiting for them to tell everybody what to do. But that has been on my mind for like a week and a half, 2 weeks, ever since I came back from the Arlington Institute. It bothers me that people they're not thinking creatively about the future. They are just like baby birds, mouth open, waiting to be fed, and what they're being fed is a bunch of crap. So that's been one thing. I don't think that we're going to have the kind of war that people think they're worried about, but I do see that coming. Armenia was a nuclear country, and that nobody was talking about that, and that they had been allowed to become a nuclear country in return for allowing their country to be a trade route for drugs coming out of Afghanistan through Iran and up through Armenia and then into Europe. And I was just boggled by that. It's like, oh my gosh, all the fuss about Iran getting nuclear stuff. And here, Armenia, Armenia is like as big as my county, and they have a nuclear bomb. Is that correct? So that, that's been on my mind. And in association with that, kind of a reminder of how big the trade is for drugs across the planet. It's the currency, and the fact that a lot of used car lots are being used as, drug trafficking spots. Here, I'll give you some drugs, you give me a car. That I don't know whether to laugh or cry about that, but it's really bothersome what's coming out, and I think there's more coming out. So
Yeah, what both of you have talked about is concurrent with Martin Armstrong's prediction. It's not a prediction so much as that the economic confidence model would do a directional change here on the 8th, I think it was, of May. And everybody, including myself, was kind of looking forward to some big event that would be very kind of clear, like COVID was the last time that there was a directional change. What he said coming out of it after watching it for a day or two, he said, maybe this has just been the peak of the kind of confidence that the world has in the kind of the fabric. They've lost confidence in the whole kind of integrity of the underlying system, and that from now on, then it ends up that there's a downward slope that goes toward next year when supposedly a global civil war gets going. And we're going to see what happens to Donald Trump here in the next day or two. The Secret Service is going and checking out, making arrangements with Rikers Island prison in New York City to how they would put Trump in there. But anyway, it's a wild and crazy time for sure. So it's time for questions. And we had a number of comments and questions from folks. Janine Rickard asked a number of kind of things, and she has a question in particular for Penny. And so, Penny, if you want to talk about that?
Yeah, a couple of things. Janine, I'll just say that I'm struck by how we so quickly revert to our old ideas about what certain phrases and certain things mean. So when I said the collective is very careful about the development of every individual, I wasn't thinking in terms of a capitalist or Marxist or socialist system at all. So it's a very different kind of civilization. So I'm sorry that reminded you of communism or Karl Marx. But the other thing that Janine had asked about was, who was the guy with the energy drinks? She said, what is the name of that energy drink tycoon who developed the personal energy machine? It's a personal energy drink. I think it's called 5 Hour Energy. And the tycoon, if you will, is an Indian name, Manoj, Manoj Bhargava, Bhargava. And he is a billionaire who has decided to make the world a better place. So he's spending his billions on water, electricity for people that don't have that.
Yeah.
Which I think is great.
Yeah, he's doing some very interesting things. It's all very big, high-tech kind of stuff. And so it's nothing like cold fusion or any kind of breakthrough things. I mean, his machines are big. By the way, the responses all of this were about related to the whole idea about how you would get to a world where it didn't have any money, because we were looking downstream. We were kind of riffing off of what we heard from extraterrestrials saying that they live without any kind of money or anything. And so she says, thanks for the masterful question. that provided concepts about the future that were not based on concepts from the past. Here's the question: in a reality where everyone's needs are met, and people think about what they can give instead of what they get, what is there to give when nobody really needs anything? I would suggest that giving becomes non-tangible or intangible kinds of things, probably. That the notion of value starts to change from being material to this larger kind of things. I don't know, Kingsley, you had some ideas about that.
I think it's a very pertinent question, because it's a question about what can we give, and because of we've been talking a lot about the material world. So there's 2 points to that question. One is, what can we give, which is a very important question. And the second part is, if people's needs are met, they have no more needs. Well, they may have no more needs in a material paradigm, but if we're going to that stage, then I think people are going to have emotional and psychological needs. And if we don't deal with emotional and psychological necessities, then we're going to have instability at that place. So I think, we have to get past the material needs. And then you're right, John, it's about what we can give is about support and coherence, and get back to our kind of family, brotherhood, sisterhood kind of understanding of collaboration. So I think, the values will be coming into giving emotional, psychological support and time, giving our energy, giving our commitment. These things which we don't often see as valuable are going to be more valuable.
That's a nice kind of segue to Christine Horner's comment and question. And she ends up saying, eventually a gift economy needs to be based on service, but it will be a process. And of course, that's compatible with these basic ideas as well. There's a clear kind of a movement away from, others have said this and for a long time, from acquisition of things toward experience. This is just an extension of that, of trying to expand the base of experience, I think. So it's very interesting quartet. I find myself asking how would and what processes are required to move from a needs-based paradigm to giving and service paradigm. That's what we're talking about. The way I envision the paradigm flip is locally within communities and regionally, when communities coalesce with like-minded groups, and yet in a blink of an eye, a fold in time can occur. That's a classic description of the state change in a highly complex system. When you look at, for instance, and the best example is kind of water, when it changes from being liquid to ice to being a solid, that it starts off by having just individual kind of nodes or elements that start to get a single crystal of ice. And this all happens within about a half a degree of transition. And then then you get some accretion around more and more crystals come around. And so you get a clustering, which would be like community in this particular case. And then all of a sudden, boom, the whole thing then just goes really quickly across everything. And so could well be. Penny, you got something you'd like to say about that?
I'm just saying that when you look at the bigger, really big picture, and you're looking at the difference between a third dimensional system and a 4 and a 5D system, third D is and must be all about survival, and teaching you, if you want to survive, if you want to become eternal, what do you have to do? You have to learn how to survive. And that teaches you all sorts of do's and don'ts. And then gradually you begin to realize it's about, what are you doing with your consciousness, your education? How are you raising your children? Is each generation wiser, smarter, more powerful than the one before, instead of wealthier than their parents were? It's the same concept, but it's a move toward consciousness that's in which the children step up in terms of wisdom, power, and grace. And there comes a point, just like you said, where all of a sudden there's all these little communities or clusters or groups that really don't want to be stuck in the 3D system. They're interested in 4 or 5. That's a change in consciousness. They know how to meet their needs. They know how to survive. What's next? They begin developing at every level, their technology, their food, their housing, their travel, their relationships with other places. So yeah, it's a beautiful change, and we're headed right toward it. And yeah, it's messy. We're in the chaos. So, but we'll be okay.
If I could add a perspective to that as well, I think I think also what's happening is that our consciousness has been pulled out of ourselves, like almost diluted. We've been
Yeah.
pulled out into these kind of homogenous type of food, basically. So that, a lot of music is just completely bland. It's very global. A lot of distraction, entertainment, movies. Our consciousness or point of consciousness has been kind of stretched and diluted onto this manufactured homogenous type of realm. So I feel that if we've gone through this recalibration or rearrangement, the consciousness is going to come back into a kind of point of richness and want to live more in the present and in presence. So you're bringing it back in. And when you bring it back in, that richness of point of consciousness will be more appreciative of the local communities, the local amenities, the things right. And my sense is that there'll be an increased living in the present and in presence of things and people around you in proximity. And that's going to give more and feed and grow the local communities.
That's what we're trying to do here in Berkeley Springs, in a sense, Kingsley, is that we're trying to build a community and aggregate a group of people who are really interested in this new world and in trying to live in a new way and seeing themselves and so on in different terms. We get together on a regular basis. We have supper clubs. We call a supper club that is kind of a bring your own food, and we all sit around and talk about the future of the county, and community garden where we got about a dozen people who are working on providing food security. And so we're trying to do that. And so you can start to see that as a kind of a node. We've had, I don't know, 10 people move into town in the last 3 years from just because they want to be around this particular kind of group of people. And more are coming. When Dave Martin was here, I had 3 people approach me and say, we want to move here. The whole dynamic that all of us have been describing is working, and it's certainly working here. So thank you all very much. And let's move on to our topic of the day. From a futurist point of view, when you look down into this future and this extraordinary kind of change, dramatic increase, it's an exponential kind of change. And you can define that exponential curve in any of a number of things: the aggregation, the amount of information that's available, the computing capability that's growing. There's just a whole bunch of a variety of kind of ways, but it all turns into be these kind of an exponential curve. And if you define that curve in terms, if you back away and try to define that curve in writ large, what's going on, you could essentially say that this giant shift into a new world is built upon breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough that is all piled on top of each other. That you're moving from one reality, one world that operates in one way to another one that is dramatically different, fundamentally different. And you have to say to yourself, so what's happens between one and the other and the other? And what you have is these extraordinary kind of inventions and ideas and other kind of things. We're talking about it in the comments here earlier about the fraying of the old reality and the decomposition of all the ideas that we've had about commitment and security and government and integrity of the government and such. These are all just indications of kind of the implosion of the old world and the emergence of a new world that by definition is built around ideas and new ideas and new discoveries and other kinds of things that allow us all to kind of redefine who we are in our personal terms, but also in larger terms, how larger reality works and how we then build the systems to sustain life as is required at that time. And so our question today kind of is, how do you get from here to there? What's likely to be, and we'll just kind of brainstorm a little bit. I thought it'd be fun to do that, is to think about what kind of new ideas or new breakthroughs or new inventions are possible, likely, probable, maybe, within the next couple of years that would become the platform for the architecture for this rapid transition into a new space. And so, Penny, maybe we can start with you.
Okay, I have a whole list. I might not get through all of them. Big breakthroughs around who else is here? ETs, extraterrestrials, people that are here, have been here, are working with the government. They're pulling strings in some places in the government, or the government is borrowing ideas from the ETs without really being able to copy the consciousness of ETs. And that's a recipe for disaster. So the big issue that I see around that is ETs becoming not appreciated or thought to be dangerous because nobody really gets to know the consciousness of those people. They just see that the tools and the technologies were borrowed in order to control. And ETs are not into that kind of control, not the good ETs. So I think that the whole thing, their involvement in government is going to lead to an understanding that the history and life of the people is very different. And that also will impact everybody socially. When you understand that your history was different, very often people reset their calendars. And so I have this thing that keeps coming to me is that within maybe not the next 2 years, but maybe within the next 5, the calendar is going to be reset. Maybe not without some argument or fussing, but that calendar basically changes everything. What happened when, and we're going to see how close we are to what we think happened thousands of years ago, and it was really hundreds of years ago. That I think is a huge breakthrough. So I think that sense or that awareness in terms of idea breakthroughs is we have been poisoned to the max. Some of it has come through water. Some of it has come through the air in the form of chemtrails. A lot of it has come through food and what we've done to food. And I think because of that, that's going to drive the new agriculture and agritecture. Buildings and houses will be built so that every single individual or family grouping or community grouping has their own food source. They want food security under their watch. And that's going to change not just what we grow, but when we grow and how we grow. And the technology is already there. It's already being used. When you treat seeds with high intensity electrical energy or electromagnetic energy, it produces more. And it's almost impervious to molds and mildews and heat and cold and drought and flood and all of those things. Those are finally, I think, going to be implemented in a very widespread kind of way. The freedom of speech gets extended to freedom of communication. Frequency medicine is on the rise. You know, it's 30 years ago. I was the first time I witnessed cancer sort of beginning to bubble when somebody was directing a frequency at it, and then sort of disintegrated and then dissolved. We're going to be seeing a lot more frequency medicine in terms of dissolving cancers, restoring mobility, fixing spines that have been destroyed and people end up paralyzed, as well as removing or regenerating the brain, cleaning the brain to just do away with Alzheimer's and dementia, all of which was a planned thing. And so those kinds of frequencies are being worked with. I'll stop there. I'll stop there.
Oh, we'll come
Okay.
back and you can say some more a little bit
Okay.
later.
All right.
So what do you think, Kingsley?
Well, thanks, John and Penny. Actually, this time I think we're quite more aligned, Penny and I, because a lot of things Penny spoke about, I was also kind of envisioning. And because obviously, I think, Penny, you're like you, my focus is much on needing the social breakthrough first. So, I mean, John, your question, when I looked at it, the question is like what you said, what big breakthroughs / inventions do you think might be inbound in the next 2 years that could substantially redirect the vector to the future? Now, you've explained it differently, by now, but I picked apart that question. So you said, what breakthroughs / inventions? Of course, a breakthrough and an invention are not necessarily the same. Inventions, we tend to think tangible, often technologically based. And a breakthrough can be something immaterial and especially social, that, And you said inbound in the next 2 years. Well, that's obviously, that depends on this perspective of this arc we're moving through, as you alluded to. And the last part of the question said, what would substantially change the vector to the future? Well, of course, there's different timelines. It could substantially change in a negative vector or a positive vector. So you see, that's where I looked at it. But I want to focus on really the positive, because there's a few, obviously, that can change into a negative vector. The first thing I want to say is like this 2-year time scale. It seems to me that as we've discussed, in the quartet, we need to go through a short, sharp shock to get over this kind of tipping point. So in the next 2 years, I think we're still going to be leading up to the painful, sharp shock. And it seems to me that we're obviously going towards 2030, kind of over the hill to 2030. And after we move through 2030 onwards, we're going to be kind of, I think, over the kind of painful injury of what's happening to us. So in the next 2 years, I'm not sure if we're going to get any specific inventions, technological, coming in, because if they do come in the next 2 years, they're more likely to be on the side of the old energy. And specifically in the next 2 years, I think we're going to see a huge buildup of a narrative to try to integrate the AI assistants into our lives. We've seen the new iteration of ChatGPT 4 something coming out. So, an increase in kind of try to get a social acceptance of drones in our everyday life, and the police increasingly using drone dogs on the streets. That's a technology I think they're trying to seep out. But on the positive side of technology, I feel like, Penny, we have to go through a social breakthrough first to clean away some of the toxicity before you catalyze or give a space for these really creative new energies coming in. One of those new energies I feel in the long term, not 2 years, but in the long term, would be a more nuanced understanding of how to use magnetics. Because I feel magnetism hasn't been fully utilized potentially. So one of that, I feel there's going to be a backlash in awareness, in the pushback from the people. We've talked about it, but it hasn't been en masse yet. And I think, one, we're going to need that civil unrest and this real kind of exhaustion in all these global structures to have a pushback. And I feel one of the pushbacks, ironically, may come from some of the political figures themselves. By that, I mean, I feel we're going to have more political resignations. And because now, if this timeline needs to go where it's going to go, a lot of these politicians who are basically glove puppet politicians are going to be asked to push the button. Whatever that button is, they're going to be asked to push the button because they're going to be asked to take the fall. So I think that's going to happen. And that's going to trigger a wave of awareness. And people are saying, actually, we've had enough of everything. And I think that's gonna trigger more insider whistleblowers, again, who are going to come out. So I think the next couple of years, the whistleblowers are coming out and saying, we've had enough. Can we redesign the governance structures at a local level that then reflects up to a national level? So I think they're going to get communities or groups of people developing new communicative structures, new forms of internet that's going to bring that about in certain ways, so you can bypass the major nationally controlled internets, the Google internet and all that, the Starlink controlled communications. You're going to have to get around that. So there are going to be technologies which are going to be localized but connect up globally, but they're going to be such a way of packet organized, they're not going to be at the whim of push button. And I think also definitely new food technologies are going to come in, because we're living in an ultra processed epoch. And Penny alluded to it in the size of people, ultra processed people. So I think, again, you're going to get technologies whereby food can be grown on a small scale, but actually at a much larger capacity. But in the next few years, John, before we get the technical things, definitely the social breakthroughs, awareness, pushback, governance, people stepping down and not going through with the narrative that when it push comes to shove. So some thoughts.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, and thank you both, because you may not have read what I wrote in the same way, but you captured the idea, and I certainly had in mind social things and other intangible kinds of stuff about all of this change. Kingsley, you also touched on something that I think is an interesting and important driving force in this, and that is the secrecy, that the secrets that'll be revealed. There are Cliff High, for instance, for one person, has been very clear in saying that what he sees is that by October, the U.S. government starts to fray. And so there's a place, if that track is the one that turns out to be the appropriate one. And then, of course, people are not paying their taxes like they used to. And paying taxes is kind of voluntary in the United States. That is to say that it's up to the person to come up and tell the government what they owe and so on, and do the calculations. Then what you get is the inability for the government to pay the different agencies and different functions within the government. And that then that becomes very much like the Soviet Union, the breakup of the Soviet Union, where you had all these guys who were trying to sell nuclear weapons and Soviet secrets and other things, because they weren't getting paid. Within the last few weeks, a new telephone's come out called an unplugged telephone that I've ordered, that I hoped would be here, that I could show you. But it is directly aimed at all of the privacy and intrusion that has become endemic with the iPhone and the Android phones and so on. This phone, when you shut the switch off, it actually shuts off. There are no records, nothing is collected about your browsing history or any of that kind of stuff. And so it's impossible for anybody to find out what you're doing and so on. You can literally, it has a switch on the thing, so that if you're going through customs and they say, give us your phone, you can punch one switch and it wipes the whole phone. And so there's nothing on it that anybody can find. So, I mean, the point is not so much the phone, but it is the innovation that is working to get its way around the kind of the problems that we have right now. Similarly, there are reports that there is a new version of an internet that is very close to becoming public. And the people who know something about it, talk about it in superlatives about how that it's impossible that anybody can get to it and can monitor it, and it's going to change everything and so on. And so if you get to something like that and it becomes reality, then what it does is it cuts the legs off of all of the institutional efforts of the intelligence community. There are almost certainly going to be some novel and interesting consciousness raising kind of processes or technologies that come along. There's enough people who are all, whether you want to talk about it in terms of manifestation or telepathy or any number of other things, I'm convinced that there is a kind of a mind shift that happens. There's a place, a certain place, a place certain, where all of a sudden, click, it turns on and you see the world, you see yourself in a different way. And suddenly you are you can far more easily access kind of some of these other new kind of capabilities. That's going to happen sometime pretty soon. There's all the talk about med beds and stuff. I mean, and you've both alluded to it one way or another of new energy things in terms of healthcare and in terms of prevention and the front end part of this, and whether it gets aggregated together into a spaceship like appliance that you can lie in and somebody can scan you, or whether it's lesser pieces that maybe ultimately come together like that. These things are all starting. The advent and the engagement with extraterrestrial life is certainly coming. And Kingsley, as you said, the artificial, you haven't even begun to see the beginning, let alone the middle or the end of what the implications of AI are. And so that's inbound. What also I think is going to happen in terms of the collaboration and the community kinds of things, there's going to be almost certainly some kind of a platform that is a whole lot better than what we got right now, that will allow and facilitate the building of communities, that'll allow you to find like-minded people in your area that you can meet with them literally and virtually and so on, and that will help facilitate this transition. And then finally, new ideas about community and how they work together. We've already touched on that. Is transition that you're familiar with, and that we're trying to get that funded, which would be this global platform where like-minded people could all find each other, but in addition, they could all work together to help build a new world, and literally a model of a new world. And so that's on the forefront of front burner, as it were, in terms of our interests.
When the dark hand of suppression is lifted, I think we're going to see like a flood of all these collaborative technologies, platforms, communications coming out from the bottom up. The energy isn't going to come from the bottom up after this threshold is passed.
And it'll all be facilitated and accelerated with AI. I'm participating in a program that Mike Adams, whose name may be familiar to you, is putting together called Brighteon, which is essentially co-opting the whole AI process and the direction and co-opting it for us. When I first heard about AI, the second thought I had was, we need one of those for us, rather than having it being driven by the kind of the woke mentality out of San Francisco. So it'll be quite interesting. So thank you very much. A delightful conversation, interesting ideas, and I appreciate it all. And for those of you who are our viewers, thank you for being with us. We really appreciate this. These kinds of new ideas and this new future is something that's central to what we try to do here at the Arlington Institute. For instance, we have this monthly speaker program that we call Transition Talks, and Isabel Benaru is going to be with us here in June. You can find out all the information about that at transitiontalks.org. And we hope that you'll come back and be with us in a couple of weeks when we do this all again. And so let's leave, as we always do, by saying, what do you think is going to happen in the next couple of weeks? Start with you, Kingsley.
Well, in the next couple of weeks, we're still within the storm clouds. I mean, I think it's very positive that in our larger discussion, we look at the brightness beyond the storm. But the next 2 weeks, we're still in the dark clouds. I sense from the European side, especially, that there's going to be a bit of a stickiness around Russia and Ukraine, because whether it's being leaked out deliberately or whether it's the secrets are slipping out, it's becoming known that the West actually has already supplied a lot more weapons to Ukraine for long range to enter Russia that they've admitted.
I think there's a moment that I think we're headed toward in the next 2 weeks, in which people are looking at the number of storms that are happening that are absolutely outrageous and saying, is there any connection between weather warfare and what is happening here? Lots of deliberate destruction, either through floods or drought, of what we have going on. All the natural weather patterns are being disrupted. It has very unnatural configurations to it. Somebody's messing with the weather.
Interesting and useful ideas, and then we'll come back in a couple of weeks and see if they all manifest themselves. Thank you, all of you who are our listeners and our viewers. We appreciate you very much, and we hope that you'll send in your comments and your questions, and we'll look at them for sure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.